Well, hello, and welcome back to The Lamppost Listener. My name is Daniel.
I'm Phil.
And this is a podcast where we journey chapter by chapter through C.S. Lewis's Chronicles of Narnia. This is chapter 9 of The Magician's Nephew, The Founding of Narnia.
Before we get started, I know what everyone's thinking. Will Daniel sing in Aslan's voice? I hope so.
You think at the end that's what we'll do? That's actually, there's no listener feedback today. We're going to have
just
a 15-minute a cappella here thing going on.
You know who I would enjoy as Aslan? I think James Earl Jones, but I'm not sure if he would be able to sing. Do you know if he sings?
I don't know if he sings. Do you think that's too similar? I mean, he's Mufasa.
Mufasa died before all the singing started.
No, they had I Just Can't Wait to Be King and The Circle of Life. He just doesn't sing those songs.
Right.
But,
that's what I'm saying.
Oh, well, but like, you know, he could be Aslan. That's good. I'd work with that.
Yeah.
Also, there's a lot of movie musicals that will have, not a lot, but some where the actor is not always the person who's actually singing.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, there's like a singing voice for someone.
Most of the princesses have a different singer.
Yeah, that's true. Well, there is a lot of singing here in the founding of Narnia. Aslan appeared last chapter. We have all of Narnia being created. A lot of weird stuff happening. I mean, I like it. Don't get me wrong. There's some weird, very surreal
This is
imagery.
very Yellow Submarine of C.S. Lewis.
We've talked before about my love for the Beatles. Have you watched Yellow Submarine?
I have.
It's wild.
That was week 2 of the summer program that I went to for art in high school.
Interesting.
We watched the Yellow Submarine, and I was very sleep deprived. I had a lot of coffee, and it was a very
You were in a similar
experience.
mindset as the people making it.
Yes,
many years.
that's
The Beatles had very little to do with it. In fact, they are John, Paul, George, and Ringo, not their voices of the cartoons.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Not them. They had 4 other. Speaking of people who had different voices, the songs obviously are them, and they had a little bit to do with the planning. They did not storyboard it. They did not write the script.
Yeah.
It was now they were really involved in like A Hard Day's Night and Help, the other 2 movies that they had done previously. And then there was like, well, we want to make this thing that will sell toys and get, we can throw it on TV and get people excited. And the Beatles had very little to do with it.
What a wild time. The animation reminds me a little bit of the animated Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Okay.
Just a little bit in that trippy 70s vibe.
60s, but that's okay.
60s.
Yeah, it's a weird thing. Man, that would be a really interesting double feature is watch
side by side.
Watch Yellow Submarine and then CBS's Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe back to back.
Back to back.
I think we have a fun plan for...
Yeah, that if we hit 1,000 Patreons...
What? Why 1,000?
Patrons, not Patreons.
I know, I do it all the time too, so that's fine.
That's confusing.
Yeah, so that's interesting. Yeah, I don't know if we'll ever show, like, is that going to be a movie we sit down as a family and we watch Yellow Submarine?
No.
I'm going to show my son. We'll definitely watch A Hard Day's Night. That one actually holds up really well. Help, not so much, and Yellow Submarine just weird.
Yeah.
There's like magical mystery tours in there. That was like a TV special, 60-minute special, but it's hard to find.
Is that the one with Miss Frizzle?
Yes, that's right. That was the TV show with Miss Frizzle on the bus and all the cool dresses. Well, we are really off topic here. Just a few minutes in. Why don't we go ahead? It's an odd chapter, so I have the summary. Actually, before we do that, is there anything we need to go over from last couple chapters, or are we good to jump right in?
I think we're good to jump right in. We're on track.
We are on track. So here is chapter 9 of The Magician's Nephew. The children, the witch, the cabbie, and Uncle Andrew continue to watch in fear and wonder as the lion continues singing the world into existence all around them. Trees grow from the ground, the stars sing, and eventually even animals, and I'm putting this in quotation marks, are birthed from the earth. The children are not fully able to enjoy the beauty because Uncle Andrew continues to pester them about the rings, all the while the lion gets closer and closer. Frightened by his growing proximity, the witch flings the lamppost at the lion, but it simply bounces off his head. Surprisingly, a lamppost begins growing in the ground where it fell. The witch departs in fear while Andrew ponders the potential for commercial profit, and Diggory wonders if this land could save his mother. Before either of them can do anything, the lion separates the animals, and then he finally speaks.
Nice. I like the cadence with which you addressed what everyone was doing, kind of one after another. Because they were all doing very different things as this lion's walking around, singing things into existence.
Yeah, one of the things that stands out about this entire chapter, kind of actually taken, I don't want to sit here and do too much like dissecting or analysis. I'd rather look at this in a much more synthetic way. I think Lewis would want us to do that. But if we do divorce this chapter kind of from chapter 8 before it, chapter 10 after it, I think one of the interesting things to analyze is the fact that so much of what was happening here feels wild and feels untamed and feels completely just without any kind of methodology to it of like what the children are seeing. And yet I think so much of what Lewis is actually doing behind the scenes as a writer is very intentional with each character's reaction, with the order of things, with some of the repetition we see. I think all of that is very intentional, which I'm excited to talk about.
Yeah. Me too.
Well, take us right away. Take us into the chapter.
Well, let's start with the lion pacing to and fro. This is the very first sentence, and it really sets the tone for the whole chapter because you have this gigantic beast who's walking back and forth, and you're reminded that the land around him is completely empty, and then he's singing this new song. And
is his mouth moving here?
I don't know. I was blown away by some of the things that Lewis chose to describe.
Okay.
For example, I don't know if in the 1950s I would have been able to come up with the special effect of a lamppost going from 3 feet tall to 4 feet tall to 6 feet tall.
Like you couldn't imagine that in your mind?
I don't know if I would be. The way he described it seemed like a modern day special effect. The way it like continues to expand and grow.
Interesting.
Instead of like going up and then the pieces coming out. It just seemed like, I think it was impressive that he came up with that at that time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I read the chapter and kind of the multiple times I looked at it, it was unclear to me if Aslan's mouth is actually moving. We know he doesn't actually speak till the end of the chapter, and his mouth does move then, obviously.
He seems more like a hummer.
It just seems, and maybe Lewis is very wise here and does not describe it because the idea of picturing Aslan's mouth moving and singing does just feel like weird.
Well, we have seen multiple puppet versions, and that's what I can't help. But
yeah,
every time I think of a mouth moving, like a lion's mouth moving, that's what I picture.
I think of this actually more of, I think of the BBC adaptations where Aslan, the mouth really doesn't move, like it opens and closes a little bit.
Yeah, that's what I'm picturing.
I kind of think that's what's happening with Aslan here. His mouth is just opening and closing, and sound is coming out of his mouth, but it's also just coming out of the clouds, coming out of everywhere. There's something poetic there. I'm not saying it poetically, but that's what Lewis is thinking.
If I were to make this into a film, I would focus more on the rippling waves of the valleys being created and stuff instead of the song. Like, maybe film it from behind the lion's head.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, all of this is, with all these things being born right in front of us, I think that it's a great time for us to go to Dr. Michael Ward and talk a little bit about Planet Narnia and the planet that this book is associated with. We haven't talked about this at all. Do you know what planet is associated with this book?
Is it Earth?
It is not.
It's not Earth?
Earth, no.
Oh, it can't be Pluto.
It's not. Earth would not be considered part of the medieval cosmology.
Okay.
So this is, remember...
Everything rotates around us. That's right.
Correct. So... correct. That's what the medievals thought. Someone's going to write into us. I'm just saving you that email. I know how the world works. I know how the universe works.
Wow.
Looking up...
Bold claim from someone
Stop that.
who was talking about the Earth being flat earlier.
The Earth is flat in Narnia. We've been over that many times.
It's flat in parts.
And it was flat in Middle Earth. Oh, wait. How did that work? We did a lot of Middle-earth discussion before. I know that Iluvatar changes the Earth from either flat to round or round to flat at the end of the Second Age. A spoiler alerts from the potentially new Amazon series. Maybe that'll happen in the show because I think that takes place in the second series or second age of Middle-earth. Maybe I just spoiled it for someone. When Numenor sinks, that happens because Iluvatar like cracks. Yeah, I think he turns it from flat to round, actually.
Oh.
Yeah. That's what happens. It was flat, and then Iluvatar, when Numenor is sunk into the middle of the sea, the earth is like bent to make it round, and then that's, remember, because that's Tolkien's version of Atlantis, thinking back to the Atlantis connections here at the beginning of Magician's Nephew that we discussed too.
That was so much.
I know, that was a really...
I'm impressed.
A lot just came out right there.
Yeah.
What were we talking about again?
Yeah, you were going to tell me which planet
I
this
was.
is.
That's right. So
let's see.
it's not Earth. Go ahead. Get one more guess.
Neptune.
It is not Neptune. Again,
It's
that
not
would
Neptune?
not have been a planet that the medievals were familiar with. Saturn would have been the last.
Okay. Jupiter.
So no, not Jupiter. That was Lion Witch in the Wardrobe. We literally did a podcast
Mercury.
on that. That was Horseman's Boy last season.
Pluto's out.
Pluto's out.
So it must be Venus.
It is Venus.
I knew
there
it.
it is.
I knew it.
It is. It is Venus.
5
the
out of 6 times.
Roman god of love, beauty, sex, birth, all these things. And we see that here, right? We clearly see some of that happening here. I want to actually go to Lewis's own poem that he wrote called The Planets. We've talked about that before. Here's what he had to say about Venus. Just 2 little lines here. Grass growing and grain bursting, flower unfolding. So that's what Lewis wrote in The Planets. But then here is what Dr. Ward writes. And I'm just pulling now, not from Planet Narnia, but from the Narnia Code. Dr. Ward writes, "Have you ever wondered why the stars sang at the creation of Narnia? It reflects a passage from the book of Job where God says, Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth, when the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for glory? Interestingly, the flash of... Oh, sorry, that's from Job 38, verse 4, and then verse 7. Interestingly, the flash of creative fire comes either from the sky or from the lion. Lewis appears to be suggesting that Aslan and the singing stars of Narnia are bringing life to Narnia between them. And when the Narnian stars sing, every drop of blood tingled in the children's bodies. Here is yet another example of Lewis making a private joke about the stars because tingle, spelled here T-I-N-G-U-L, as was pointed out in an earlier chapter, is the Old English word for star. It's a further indication that the influence of the starry heavens, and in particular the influence of Venus, the creative planet, is at work in the story.
That's cool.
So there's so much to read, and again, we've recommended many times. We'll probably put the link in the episode's description for people to check out. Even if you don't want to read all of Planet Narnia, go get the Narnia Code, which I'm holding right here and reading from. It's less than 200 pages. It's a great little short read, not tricky, or it's very, very accessible. One of the reasons I wanted to read this as opposed to reading more just about, I think, some basic influence we can see, like in the actual creation and birth that's happening in this chapter, is that little paragraph reminds us of Lewis's dedication to simply sometimes, I think, just amusing himself in his own writing. And that sounds like I'm downplaying his intelligence. I don't want it to sound that way. I think it's wonderful that he seemed to just revel in knowledge and wisdom, and not for the sake of gaining knowledge because you now have more information, but in seeing the way that all things are connected in this very synthetic kind of view of education.
Right. He loved to weave things together, and he had a very impressive memory. I remember at one of the lectures at the International C.S.
I thought one of the lectures you saw him give. I was like, wow.
No. Unfortunately not. But one of the lectures, they talked about how he never forgot anything he read. Now, I think that is obviously a slight exaggeration.
Sure.
But I think that he was pulling from a very wide breadth of knowledge of things that he had read.
So yeah, this is just fun because it kind of shows us Lewis's, continued influence of the medieval worldview of the cosmos, but also kind of points to some of the biblical allusions as well too. So I just wanted to point that out right here as we're thinking through this, because it just so perfectly encapsulates Lewis's love for the medieval world and his love for these biblical supposals as well too. So we can
also
dive,
the origin of the song "Tingle Tingle Little Star."
Oh yeah, that's
Fun fact.
that's where it comes from. All right, well let's get back to this chapter. So Aslan is walking towards our group of characters here, and the witch in particular is disturbed. I mean, everyone's disturbed. It's a lion walking towards you who wouldn't be disturbed, but the witch picks up the lamppost and throws it at Aslan. Now, before all this happens, we didn't say that Uncle Andrew's continually trying to get the ring back from Diggory. The witch is saying, no, you can't do that. And it's in this moment that the lion is approaching. Now, last chapter, you brought up, okay, she brought a lamppost with her to Narnia. I think I've got it figured out what's going to happen. Did you think it's going to hit Aslan square in the head and then start growing out of the ground?
Not at all. I did think it would be left behind and then happen to start growing, or maybe he works around it or something. I don't know. But I did not expect it to be thrown directly between his eyes.
Yeah. And a really interesting thought here is how it doesn't appear to be like, it's not as if this lamppost hits Aslan and then just gets stuck in the ground and there it is. But instead, the image we get is it actually growing out of the ground. It's almost as if the power of Aslan is so great that everything, even something extremely industrial like a lamppost, which is a great image of like human accomplishment, right? It's lighting the dark. So it's kind of humans' dominance over nature, over the natural world. And yet all of that is still submitted before the dominion of Aslan. Not just the natural world is growing, but even humans' accomplishments are growing out of here with the lamppost as well too. And it also just shows in this very shows that the influence of Venus as a heavenly body in the fact that everything is just bursting with light, like extremely fertile, right? Which fertility was heavily associated with Venus as both a planetary influence, but also with the Roman god, and then going all the way back to Aphrodite as well too. And there's many different throughout. I mean, pretty much any kind of pantheon of pagan gods, you're going to find a goddess of fertility. That's just going to be there, right?
It was a big deal back then.
I mean, I think fertility is a big deal all the time, but sure. But yeah, I mean, I love that image of just everything is so fertile, even this lamppost has to grow out too.
Yeah. It just demonstrates that he not only has power over the organic stuff, but also the inorganic things. For example, this man-made lamppost. So as soon as the lion is hit, I think that Jadis realizes that she is not going to be able to do very much here. The lion keeps walking. It's not speeding up. It's not slowing down. But it's the fact that you can't even tell that it was hit that I think terrifies her. And sure enough, she shrieks and then she runs away.
And she's gone for the chapter.
And she's out of sight. And we don't hear from her again.
To The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Yeah. Really?
What do you think?
I could see that being the case.
Okay. Interesting.
I think that would be pretty odd story-wise for this book.
Could happen, though.
But overall, I think I could see how that would work.
All right, so moving on, we get a great conversation between who's quickly becoming the best character in this book, Uncle Andrew, in my opinion, and Diggory. You know, Uncle Andrew, who has been just so terrified of the witch, which, by the way, we didn't go over. We skipped. We were so excited about the appearance of Aslan. We didn't mention that he kind of goes on a tirade. He kind of like yells at the witch.
Yep.
Not much comes of it because the cabbie interrupts him, and that's when Aslan shows up and everything.
But he confronts her more than he had in the past. Where
Exactly.
He was very hat in his hand before, but he talked back to her, got interrupted by the cabbie. All the Aslan stuff happens, and then she runs away. And as soon as she's out of the picture, he has even more confidence, and he kind of forgets everything that that happened before.
Exactly. He has a very short memory. Uncle Andrew calls Diggory an extremely disobedient, ill-behaved little boy because Diggory won't give him the ring just so that they can vanish, leaving Polly, Cabby, and the horse behind. And Diggory's saying, no, like, Uncle Andrew, you wanted to come explore all these worlds. And then Uncle Andrew has something very interesting to say. I'm not saying that this is not a most interesting place. If I were a younger man now, perhaps I could get some lively young fellow to come here first. One of those big game hunters. Now, something might be made of this country. The climate is delightful. I've never felt such air. I believe it would have done me good if circumstances had been more favorable. Oh, if only we'd had a gun.
That is the classic view of, oh, here's this wonderful, beautiful thing. How can I make money with this? And then let me get a gun.
Yeah,
so that I can take some of this with me.
Well, yeah, there's later on we see a little bit more of his plans for this, but this is kind of the beginning of Uncle Andrew's idea of exploiting this world, right?
Yeah.
A new place has been found. He even makes allusions to Columbus later on too.
Right.
A quote unquote new place has been discovered, and there's already someone here ready to exploit it. Now there's other good people there not trying to do that. Diggory and Polly are there and all just as viewers. They're not trying to participate in controlling this place, but you already have Uncle Andrew wanting to exploit them.
And luckily the cabbie immediately
shuts him down,
which is great.
And
but it also, that has to be a record for the shortest time that something exists before somebody's trying to exploit it.
I mean, let's go back to Genesis 3. I mean, how long into Scripture does it take before humans exploit? And
yeah, it's a really good point. About 2 chapters, I guess.
Exactly. And I know scholars debate over how long Adam and Eve are in the garden before the fall, but there is, so quickly this perfect world already has selfishness enter into it. And now, thankfully, or at least we haven't seen so far, Uncle Andrew's not able to do much, but the thought is still there. Right? And then I do love that the cabbie just is like, this doesn't even logically make sense. Like, you think a gun's going to stop the singing lion that's creating everything around you? Like, come on, that's a ridiculous thought. And then Uncle Andrew goes back and compliments the witch for being a plucky gal, right? For having thrown the lamppost. But as all of this is happening, that's when we see that lamppost grow up and the bar from the lamppost start to grow, and that's when Uncle Andrew tells us the rest of his plans. Do you want to read that part?
Uncle Andrew says, "That's it. Stupendous, stupendous." And he's rubbing his hands together at this point. He says, "Ho, ho, they laughed at my magic. That fool of a sister of mine thinks I'm a lunatic. I wonder what they'll say now. I have discovered a world where everything is bursting with life and growth. Columbus now. They talk about Columbus. But what was America to this? The commercial possibilities of this country are unbounded. Bring a few old bits of scrap iron here, bury 'em, and up they come as brand new railway engines, battleships, and anything you please. They'll cost nothing, and I can sell 'em at full prices in England. I shall be a millionaire. And then the climate. I feel years younger already. I can run it as a health resort. A good sanatorium here might be worth $20,000 a year. Of course, I shall have to let a few people into the secret. The first thing is to get that brute shot." And again, he's trying to shoot the lion. Diggory's already told him, you can't shoot him. You can't even hit him with a telephone pole. Not a telephone, lamppost.
So I think the best response to this actually comes from Oscar Wilde.
Really?
Yes.
I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, by way of Joseph Pierce, who in his book pointed, that we've talked about before, Further Up and Further In, he pointed to this quote by Oscar Wilde, which I'd heard before but had not thought of in many years, and it's such a great one. Here's what Oscar Wilde says, and man, oh man, does it sum up Uncle Andrew. Oscar Wilde says, "A cynic is someone who knows the price of everything and the value of nothing."
Wow.
So great.
Hmm.
And that's exactly who Uncle Andrew is. He knows the price of everything, but nothing's value.
Right. That is a really good fit for that.
Yeah.
Huh.
So he looks and thank you, Joseph Pierce, and Oscar Wilde. So he looks at this beautiful world. He's seeing something that it's impossible to even dream of. Not impossible to dream of, but something that's absolutely incredible, and all he can think about is using it for just such mundane things.
Yeah.
Right?
You're watching a world be created out of thin air by a singing lion, and you're thinking about the money you can make. If you think through that enough, why do you want the money? Like, what is going to be better than what you just got to see? Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
And especially because supposedly, right, he was searching for magical worlds all along. Isn't this been what his heart, quote unquote, truly wants? I thought this is what he wanted. No, of course, that's not what he really wants. He wants fame and fortune and riches, and he doesn't care about magic for the sake of, its own beauty or goodness. He cares about it for its use to gain him power. And this actually goes back to this whole idea of scientism that we've talked about, throughout this season, that Uncle Andrew represents these things. And in fact, going back to the same page that Joseph Pierce talks about, that Oscar Wilde quote, he has this to say. I thought this was really interesting about how this points to scientism. He says, one of the myths of our scientistic age is the naive belief that science is a dispassionate seeker after truth and not a tool being used by those who are most powerful to increase their wealth and power still further. Now, I will say that can be kind of a cynical way to look at science, but we have to remember Pierce is talking about scientism, right? The use of science, right, as a means for control, for power. That's exactly what Lewis is thinking about in this, post-World War II world that he's...
And post-atomic weapons
exactly
being created, yeah.
This idea, and I think we all, myself too, fall into this trap, and I'm not going to get into my classical education soapbox right now, because that's not what we're here for, but I think a lot of this comes from, we often view science, which we're only thinking of the hard sciences when we're talking about the science in the first place, as this dispassionate seeker after truth, as in truth can only be found there. And I think a lot of our forebearers would have said that science goes alongside things like theology, right? It goes alongside the humane letters, the humanities, right? And that there's truth in other, it's not just the scientific truth. I mean, that's, if we think all the way back to like Aristotle's Common Topics, I think we start to get to some, I'm not going to get into all that now because that's a little bit more of the classical education thing. But I do think that what Lewis is saying ties into this theme of scientism we've looked at over the course of this book.
Right. Well, there are two things left to cover in this.
Ooh, what are they?
To me, the first one is Diggory gets a hint of how he may be able to help his mother.
Yes. Tell me about that.
He, in the middle of Uncle Andrew talking about, restorative properties and, Fountain of Youth and stuff, he is, one of those words triggers the thought in his head that, maybe something from this world can help my mom, because he remembered the conversation that nothing in their world could help her. But maybe in this new place where all this life is happening, there's something that he could grab and bring back.
Yeah.
But he gets distracted by something else. And it's the fact that the animals are now being created.
Born from the ground.
Born from the ground.
The antlers of the stags are just like poking through, looking like tree roots. And then all of a sudden, there's a head.
Right.
I love the fact that Lewis first mentions the moles, who they just look like moles coming out of the ground. Like at first, everyone's like, "Oh, that's what moles do," and they're like, "Oh, wait, the dogs are doing it too." Wait a second.
Yeah, it made sense then, and now it.
When the elephant comes out, everything. You know something's up.
Right. Yeah.
What do you think about this image, the animals coming out of the ground? I mean, when you think of, and actually, I'd like to read it in a minute. When you think of, actually, I'm going to read it right now. Let me read Genesis chapter 1 for us. So here is the Genesis account of the creation of the beasts of the earth. I'm going to read about 7 chapters from Genesis, and then we can compare them. Let's do that. This is Genesis chapter 1, verses 24 through 31. And God said, "Let the earth bring forth the living creature after his kind, cattle and creeping thing, and beast of the earth after his kind, and it was so. And God made the beast of the earth after his kind, and cattle after their kind, and everything that creepeth upon the earth." I'm reading from the King James Version, by the way.
I can tell.
After his kind, and God saw that it was good. It just felt right. You know what I mean?
I thought maybe you bit your tongue accidentally and it was a little bit swollen.
All right, back
A
to
lot of
verse 26 here. And God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth." So God created man in his own image, and in the image of God he created him. Male and female created he them. And God blessed them, and God said unto them, "Be fruitful and multiply, and replenish the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth." And God said, "Behold, I have given you every herb bearing seed, which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree in the which is the fruit of the tree yielding seed. To you it shall be for meat. And to every beast of the earth, and to every fowl of the air, and to everything that creepeth upon the earth, wherein there is life, I have given every green herb for meat," and it was so. And God saw everything that he made, and behold, it was very good. And the evening and the morning were the 6th day.
Well, I think that's where Lewis got his inspiration from, don't you?
So when I read that, now I did not grow up reading the King James Version. I just thought it would be a fun way to kind of engage with it here. I do love some of the beauty and the poetry
Yes.
in the KJV.
I have much more of an appreciation for it now, but gosh, if it wasn't hard to read earlier.
But I know
Still
for
is.
me, when I grew up hearing that story many, many times, it was the ESV words, but still, I never once pictured animals growing out of the ground.
Mm-hmm.
But as I thought about it, preparing for this chapter, I don't know what I thought of at all.
Right. I was just thinking that.
I'm not sure what I pictured.
I just assumed that the animals suddenly were there.
I think I did
There was
too.
no, the movies, every movie has, when they're telling a story, they kind of grow out of the sand and then they take form or something. Here's how I like to think about it. I bet it was like balloon animals, where he's, reaching into the ground, pulling up long stretches of taffy ground, and then twisting it into a shape.
But see, what's interesting, I was thinking about that too, and how, especially in a lot of ancient mythologies, when you have the creation of the world, there often is this idea of dirt, right? And it's very interesting that Lewis has the animals coming out. They're not necessarily being made from the dirt. That's not necessarily clear, but they're coming directly out of the earth. And yet that's not what happens in the Bible. Instead, we know that it's Adam who is made from the dirt, right, in the Bible. I think that's in Genesis chapter 2, that it's Adam. Yeah, it says, "Then the Lord God formed the man of dust from the ground and breathed," sorry, now we're back to the ESV. "Then the Lord God formed the man of dust from the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living creature." So the imagery that we do get from Genesis is Adam being created out of dust, dirt from the earth, and yet it's in Narnia that the animals are. And I wonder if that is because that's what Narnia is populated with. It's not really populated by humans originally. We know that there are humans who do rule over it, but so far in the first 5 books we've read, none of the humans are originally from Narnia. Even the Telmarines who lived there were originally not from Narnia, we've learned. So I wonder if that's part of it, if there is some kind of supposal of the animals here kind of having that place that humans have in our world.
Yeah. It would certainly seem like it. And maybe he's already made humans somewhere else.
Aslan?
And this is supposed to be an animal world, and then the humans will be brought in.
I had not thought of this. This is a really interesting... I don't have a lot of thoughtful things to say about it, just questions to ask, which is... All right, so the end of Dawn Treader, Aslan reveals himself and says, you need to learn me by another name in your world, okay? So supposing Aslan is God, right, in our world. This is happening in 20th century England. So is that saying that obviously God exists outside of time, but is this like actually 2,000 years after Jesus that Aslan is then how does, I know that we're reading too far into it. Lewis would not want us to do that, but the timeline does become confusing then. So like Aslan's out creating new worlds, but like there's already other worlds that exist and have been around for thousands of years, millions of years. What do we make of all of that?
Yeah. I think we could figure out a way for that to work, but I also think that the time just works so...
No, we're not supposed
it's
to.
It's so different in each place. And it's not a continuous thing. It's not like one is existing at one rate and another is at another rate. It's just whatever's convenient for the story.
That's true.
And I am totally fine with
that. So all of this happens, and then we get the actual words of Aslan. Oh, no, we got to talk about these animals first. Yeah, that probably weirded you out, right?
Well, it was interesting that he makes multiples of each animal, but then he grabs two of each kind.
Two of some kind. Some animals don't get picked at all.
Right, two of each kind that he's picking. He's not grabbing 4 of a particular type of animal. He's grabbing 2 of each of the ones that he selects.
Mm-hmm.
And then he just says, all right, everybody gather around. And they get a little special dose of something that gives them the ability to speak, I'm guessing.
That's your guess.
Well, the 2 beavers, that's what tipped me off.
But these aren't the beavers from Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe.
You don't think so?
This is... You think it's that... We know that the winter... Jadis is winter. It's 100 years of always winter and never Christmas. Mm-hmm. So the beavers are either 100 years old or someone lied about how much time has passed.
Yeah. And they could be 100 years old.
No way.
They're giant. They're human-sized beavers, according to the BBC. And if we can't trust the BBC, who can we trust?
I'm going to take the opposite angle then and say that they are definitely not the same beavers as before. But I think there is a connection there that I don't want to get too far into. Why do you think, though, that this is happening? Why?
Can we just return to the fact that a lion is walking around singing a song and giving animals the ability to speak, but you don't think they can live for 100 years? That's the part you have trouble with?
All right. You've got a good point there.
I have a bow and arrow. None of this makes any sense. Name that movie.
I don't know off the top of my head.
Age of Ultron.
Oh, yeah. I saw it like the once.
You only saw it once?
Maybe a second time.
Gosh, I watch that movie all the time.
Oh, okay. I think you might be the only person.
I also like Iron Man 2.
Okay. Why, if they are becoming talking beasts, and some of this we can save because we have a guest coming to join us for the next chapter, but why some animals and not all? Why not make everyone a talking beast? Why single out certain animals over others?
Maybe it's a time thing. He's trying to get this done in less time than 6 days. I don't know. I thought it was interesting, and it certainly makes it makes things kind of make sense for what we know from The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, where it does not every single animal is walking around talking. And then later we hear about some of the animals who they used to be able to speak and now they can't anymore. They've kind of returned to their wild nature. All of this kind of lines up, but it is curious that it's not every animal 2x2. It's a lot of the animals 2x2.
Yeah, man, I don't have a good answer for us right now either. I think it's something we can... I have an idea, but I actually want to save it for next chapter. But even then, I'm interested to hear others' thoughts as well too. I will say I don't think I saw a couple of people thinking maybe this is Lewis kind of showing predestination. But we can clearly state Lewis did not believe in predestination. He wrote about it multiple times in some of his letters. So I don't think that's what's happening here. Yeah. I don't think this is Lewis kind of separating the elect versus the non-elect.
That would be a non-Calvinist view? Is that
correct.
Right?
Lewis is not a Calvinist. You're exactly right.
But was that his choice? That's the real question.
You're hilarious. What's funny is, I mean, we're both not anymore, although we love our Presbyterian brothers and sisters. You and I both grew up Presbyterian.
We did.
Neither of us are Presbyterian.
Different sides of the aisle.
Yeah. No. We both grew up.
Sometimes you describe your church growing up, and I thought, did I go to a Presbyterian church? We definitely had committees, right?
Yeah, Presbyterians love committees.
Got to form a committee.
Yeah. And my parents still attend the same Presbyterian church. So do your parents, actually. Both of our parents are, all four of them are Presbyterians.
Yeah. But it's a bit of a ship of Theseus, don't you think?
What?
Is it the same church?
What do you mean?
Like multiple renovations. Almost all the people are different. The leadership's different.
Do y'all have different pastors and everything?
Yeah. But it just kind of completed that cycle of the people that I grew up with. Sure. Are now retired.
There's still, when we go back to the church I grew up in, there's still quite a few people we know. And a lot of the leadership's still the same too. Huh. So that's kind of fun.
Yeah.
We just were actually at church I grew up in. It was my mother's 60th. But can I say her age on the show?
Yeah, it makes it slightly more likely that your bank account will be affected. What was her maiden name again?
No.
Drewsbury.
It was her 60th birthday, and we went. And my grandparents, so her parents and her sister and brother-in-law, and then Anna and I and our son, we all surprised her at her church. Because a lot of us all live around here, but we'd go to different churches. And so we all surprised her on her birthday at the church, which was fun. So that was the first time I'd been back in a couple of years.
Yeah.
Because I don't really visit because I'm at my church. So.
Did you have little things in the back of the pew for the communion cups?
We did, yeah. We did. That's
classic.
What is it called when you have like the small, I know dipping,
It's not intinction.
No, intinction is where you take the bread and the wine and you would dip the bread into the wine. I'm a common cup guy. Our church has not reinstituted it since COVID, unfortunately. Yeah. But I'm always no. Give me the cup. I'm going to put my lips on it just like everybody else. Yeah. I don't care. I love the imagery of it. And that was something that was new to me when we began attending an Anglican church a few years back. And it was something that at first I was like, no, I'm going to still do intinction. That option was given. Mm-hmm. But I was like, no, like I want to drink from the cup. I did it for about 6 months, and then COVID hit, and then everyone's like, I'm not drinking from that cup anymore.
Now we have these disposable wafer things with you peel this tab back, and you pull the wafer out, you peel another tab back.
I can't tell if you're being facetious or not.
That's a real thing.
Do y'all really do that?
Yes. At my parents' church.
Interesting.
Yeah. Have you seen Blade 2?
Where is this going?
It doesn't make any sense if you haven't seen it.
No, I've not seen Blade 2.
What if they could get the fire sprinklers to shoot out the grape juice? That would be. Someone listening to this right now has seen Blade 2 and they know what I'm talking about and they're cracking up.
Let's finish here. Let's actually do one more kind of theological point here. Is the very last line spoken. So Aslan, after all this happens, he finally speaks in the deepest, wildest voice. Well, I can't read this then. This is what he says, though. Narnia, Narnia, Narnia. Awake, love, think, speak. Be walking trees. Be talking beasts. Be divine waters.
And then it smash cuts.
I love reading it even the first time. It was very clear the repetition of 3. Narnia, Narnia, Narnia. Then were 3 commands. Love, think, speak. And then 3 things are supposed to be. Be walking trees, be talking beasts, be divine waters. So a lot of Trinitarian imagery there that I think is very purposeful.
Yeah, your classic
Lewis.
3-for-1 combo.
Is that how you learned about the Trinity when you were growing up? Like, so other religions
I went to
have
Sonic Baptist.
What's funny is like you could have said I went to Sonic Church, but you had to make it a Baptist church. Yeah, you couldn't leave that one alone. We just said we grew up Presbyterians. We have to get one swipe in at our Baptist brothers and sisters.
I will say, I understand. It took 10 years, but I finally understand some congregation jokes.
Okay, you mean denomination jokes?
Yes. Well, yes.
What are some good ones you have?
You. Oh, I've used it.
No, just do it. Do it. I don't care. I've told my Baptist joke already on the show. So
the fact that Presbyterians are always forming
for committees, they're always making committees.
But there are some that I don't fully get. Like we were with the group, and they made a few jokes, and people kind of chuckled, and then they made a Baptist joke, and everyone this was like a mostly Presbyterian group. Yeah. They were dying laughing. They thought it was so funny. I don't.
Speaking of for more just denominational insight here, a buddy of mine is Lutheran, and he was saying he's on, I don't think they call it the vestry in Lutheran churches. I think they call it like a council, but kind of the body that's helping kind of oversee the business side of it. For any of our Lutheran listeners, I'm sorry if I'm getting some of the terminology incorrect, but he was on that, and then a separate committee as well too. But one of their committees ended a year ago, and they didn't realize that the final thing they're supposed to do for the committee is they're supposed to pick they're supposed to nominate their successors, and they didn't. So they had to meet one more time as a committee, and they had to send permission to the bishop. I think that Lutherans have bishops, right?
I don't know.
I'm pretty sure they do. So they had to go to their diocese, get permission from the bishop. We're going to have this committee meeting again just one time so we can do this thing.
No, we need the next one.
He was saying it's all just a silly formality, for some of these things. But he was it was just funny. We have to meet back up in our committee to then make the new committee. I was like, that sounds like you're in a Presbyterian church.
Yeah. I love a good committee.
Oh, yeah. I don't know any good Anglican jokes, but if anyone has some, if you were a Baptist or Presbyterian and we were making jokes about you, you can send any Anglican jokes my way. If you want to make fun of Phil for being non-denominational, just remember that means he's Baptist, but with a better website. That's what non-denominational churches are. I'm kidding. Although your church, not known for having a great website.
Name a church that is. To the point that sometimes when they do have a good website, I get a little sketched out.
You're a little worried about it?
What are they? Why are they spending all the money on this? Which is actually the problem for the ones that don't have a great website is they don't understand that, yes, you do need to. And I say this as a developer.
Yeah, I love going on a church website and you're like, 1999 was the last time someone updated this.
Anytime, do you know what a marquee is?
Yeah, I know what a marquee is.
Do you know what a marquee is on a website?
Oh, no. I thought you just said
it's where the text is scrolling.
Okay, yeah. That was huge.
Yeah. There's actually, in very basic HTML, there's a way to do that. It's very simple. You just put the marquee tag, and luckily it's being phased out. It might already be gone at this point. It's been a few more years. But if that's on there, just run the other way. That's anything where the text is moving from the right side to the left side, just get out of there.
I love some of the simplicity of the world was a simpler place when its websites had marquees.
I remember when we had a Windows 98 computer and we did not have Service Pack 2, so I couldn't play any games. Mm-hmm. But I could go on websites and I had a list of bookmarks and I had 26 bookmarks. Those are all the things that I was interested in at the time. Now I have 2,631 and I've just stopped bookmarking things. There's no point. I can never find anything anymore.
That's too many bookmarks.
Yeah, I agree with you.
All right. Well, we do actually, I joked earlier, but we do have some listener feedback. And to get into that listener feedback, Phil, what is here on our desk in front of us?
This is J.R.R. Tolkien's The Return of, wait for it, not what you think it is, The Shadow.
The Return of The Shadow. Not a lot of people know about this. It's the fourth book in the Lord of the Rings. And again, I was joking because Lord of the Rings is one book. But no, The Return of the Shadow, it's part of the history of Middle-earth. It's the sixth book in the history of Middle-earth. and
edited by his son, Christopher
edited
Tolkien.
by Christopher Tolkien. It's kind of a
Was
collection.
it published posthumously?
Yeah. These came out. I think Christopher Tolkien started working on these. They started coming out in the 80s and into the 90s, I think. I have not read all of them. They're not really books you pick up and read through. Like, for instance, this book, The Return of the Shadow, which I haven't even said why I have this out. It goes through, it's like the history of the Lord of the Rings. It goes through the chapter, but with not just, Tolkien's writing, but with notes from Christopher alongside it. But it's Tolkien's like original writing as he's planning it out. So, for instance, in this chapter near the beginning of the book, from Hobbiton to the Woody End, you get part of chapter 3 of The Lord of the Rings, which is Three's Company, but you have Bingo Baggins, which I think we've brought up on the show before. And so you have, I hope Bingo has not got locked up in the cupboard or something, said Odo. He's late. It's after 6.
Wow.
So
no need to change those.
Yeah. So the reason I have this is because we actually got an email asking us about Tolkien and Lewis as well. And this is an email from Adam. Adam writes, "Hey, Dan and Phil, I am currently binge listening to your podcast. I'm a wildland firefighter working in another state for a few weeks helping control wildfires during this drought." Pause. Thanks, Adam.
Yeah, that's very, very helpful.
It's a very heroic thing. Thank you.
And hard work.
I've actually been listening for years, but waiting 2 weeks between shows makes me antsy. Basically, I look forward each summer to catching up on your podcast during my time off while helping with fires in other states. Although I do listen to your special episodes during the year, usually while mowing the grass. That's when I listen to them before I edit them often. Yeah, I put them on. I connect them to my computer, and my yard's small enough that I can...
I thought you had a Bluetooth mower.
And yeah, no. Adam continues, "Maybe this was discussed already, or maybe it's just too obvious, but I wanted to comment on the use of magic rings. I wonder what Tolkien thought about Lewis's use of magic rings in his story. There's one other event that is also similar to one of Tolkien's major events in the Middle-earth Legendarium, but I won't spoil anything yet, mainly because it's been a while since I last read The Magician's Nephew, and I can't remember exactly when it occurs. It is a good incentive for me to go ahead and read it again. Still enjoying your show as much as ever. It is something I look forward to listening to each morning I'm here. I'm a patron now, and I also look forward to the Turkish Delight episode, which Phil and I, we gotta do that soon. Maybe we'll do it for the Christmas episode this year. No, we did do it. We did the Turkish Delight episode. That's right. I forgot. We did that was that this past Christmas or 2 Christmases ago?
I think it was this past Christmas.
This past one, yeah. So Adam, yeah, you'll get there eventually when you go through those long lists of, I think we've done about 35 or so Dancing on episodes.
Yeah.
Somewhere in there is us eating Turkish Delight. A lot of good ASMR sounds if you're into.
That's right.
If
Yeah,
you
held
like
the
that
microphones
stuff.
right up.
It says, unless, of course, you've already done it on the Dancing Lawn Patreon site, which I just said we have. If so, I'll know soon as I explore through it. This is from Adam from Arkansas. Thank you, Adam.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. I just saw Adam's name pop up because I was sending out the latest round of stickers. We just sent out
Nice.
season 6, the new set of stickers for the album artwork that you can probably see right now.
You can
on your
look right now
mobile
at your
device.
phone.
But it also
Or
includes
iPod, sorry.
for this round, because we only ordered enough of this to do the current supporters. We also included a little bonus sketch version.
Oh, that's true.
sticker.
Yeah.
Smaller size, very tasteful. But yeah, Adam has all those stickers coming his way.
Nice.
For supporting us at the which level? We have a name for it.
The
$5 a month level.
Did we call that one the Lantern Waste?
That sounds right.
I think that's what we call that one. Well, Phil, go ahead and answer Adam's question. Why rings?
I think he stole it from Tolkien.
Why did Tolkien pick rings?
They're everywhere. I think it's because it already has a symbolic power to us and something about continuity and infinity.
So this is great. Because I was reading about this just recently this week, kind of looking through Adam's email and thinking about the show, and I'm familiar with some medieval stories, especially some Anglo-Saxon stories, which obviously Tolkien would have been familiar with Anglo-Saxon literature. Even going back to Beowulf, where there's some exchanging of rings between like lords and vassals. There are stories like King Horn, a couple other different places where you see rings kind of play a little bit of a prominent role in medieval literature. So I think that is something both Tolkien and Lewis would have obviously been aware of. But on top of that is what you just said, which is that rings for a long history, not just in the West, but in the East as well too, have a lot of prominent value. They're often made of precious metals, and they often have spiritual or emotional significance, right? I mean, you and I are both wearing wedding bands, which symbolize our marriages, right? Mm-hmm. And they're both made out of gold as well too. Right. And so and that's not a tradition that's like a recent thing. Right. Yeah. The idea of rings having prominent parts in our kind of day-to-day life has been around for a long time. So I think it's kind of a combination of medieval literature as well as the idea that rings are just a prominent thing, but they're also extremely common. Right. There's something that seem almost insignificant, but yet my ring has a very strong emotional weight to me, despite the fact that it's this tiny little thing on my finger that I mostly forget is there, right? And so, I mean, I don't know for Adam, I don't know if Lewis was like, oh, Tolkien's writing that ring book, and maybe that's where I'll get that from. I think they both were probably pulling from
the same
thing.
Inspirations,
but So I was thinking all of this, and then I realized I was overthinking it because I went to The Return of the Shadow, and then on literally page 6, not even to chapter 1, in the foreword of the book.
Is this Roman numeral 6?
No, this is like actually page 6.
Oh, well. Well, it was the 90s.
So now all of that is to say that I think Lewis and Tolkien pulled from these two things. And it might have been that Lewis was not at all focused on what Tolkien was up to. However, I did just want to bring up The Return of the Shadow because it seems like it's, in the same way that this happened to Bilbo getting the ring in The Hobbit, it seems like it's just chance in a way that the ring becomes such a prominent thing in The Lord of the Rings. Because, as we've talked about before, Tolkien had no plans on writing The Lord of the Rings when he was writing The Hobbit. I mean, he was thinking about other stuff, but he did not have what currently exists anywhere near in his head. So here's actually what Tolkien wrote, and this is in letter 257, talking about kind of the creation of The Lord of the Rings. He said, "The magic ring was the one obvious thing in The Hobbit that could be connected with my mythology. To be the burden of a large story, it had to be of supreme importance. I then linked it with the originally quite casual reference to the necromancer, whose function was hardly more than to provide a reason for Gandalf going away and leaving Bilbo and the dwarves to fend for themselves, which was necessary for the tale." And I'll just stop right there because it's Tolkien being like, oh no, I just was like, what thing can I bring over from the last book? That ring will work. And that's... Yeah. The ring became so prominent in Lord of the Rings.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Because it really is, and the whole book is about that.
It's called The Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
And it was, he looked back at that story, which we've talked about, I think on this show too, that Tolkien did do a little bit of rewriting of Chapter 5, Riddles in the Dark. Technically, if you go to a bookstore now, you're buying the second edition of The Hobbit.
Oh, really?
Because there was a couple of things that Tolkien realized, hey, wait a second, this doesn't make sense for my mythology that I've now created, because that it wasn't created at the time of The Hobbit, at least the idea of the rings and like the rings of power and whatnot. And so actually, if you go open up to go grab your Hobbit book right there, because the other listeners can do this. It's really cool. If you go to the front of anyone's copy of The Hobbit that comes after 1954, when Lord of the Rings was published, around that time, the beginning of it has a section before chapter 1 about changes in the book, in which Tolkien kind of says that, hey, there were some mistakes in the last one, but that was Bilbo's fault.
That's a great way to do that.
So, yeah, Phil's copy of The Hobbit says now a major motion picture. I hate that. I do not like movie tie-ins. But in a lot of copies of The Hobbit, you can actually find where it says, Tolkien actually writes, hey, there were some inconsistencies the last time, but that wasn't my fault as the author. Bilbo just didn't relate them to me. Like, he had kind of hidden the story. He told the story wrong, like incorrectly. And now I've kind of gone back and we've learned more of the real details since then, which is such a funny thing. Because Tolkien does have that very casual relationship with readers in The Hobbit. He does a lot more talking to his audience.
Yeah.
But so, yeah, I just thought that was a really fun thing that I wanted to bring up. Not exactly what Adam was asking, but even the fact that Tolkien, the ring was put there kind of insignificantly, maybe just because of rings and medieval literature, and then it happened to make its way into Lord of the Rings because Tolkien was like, what thing can I bring over from the last book? Boom, it's the ring. There it is.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a really fun thing to bring up.
We're bringing in a lot of outside information for this episode.
A lot of this one. Yeah. So any final things, though, before we go?
Well, I'm very curious to see what happens from this point because our main antagonist is gone. We have an entire new world created, and we don't have very many chapters left.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, the next chapter, chapter 10, is called The First Joke and Other Matters.
Ooh, that'll be good.
Interesting. What do you think the first joke is?
Hope it's a pun.
Well, Phil, why don't you go ahead and wrap up our episode here?
Be happy to. This episode is made possible by our patrons over at patreon.com. If you'd like to support the show, you can listen to a bonus episode each month along with other rewards. Special thanks goes to Hannah Anderson, John Marr, Emily Wakefield, and Ryan Smith for supporting us at our top tiers. Listener feedback can be sent to thenarniapodcast@gmail.com. Voicemails can be left at 406-646-6733. A review on Apple Podcasts would be appreciated. Thank you for coming along on this journey, and we'll be back next time with Chapter 10.